Good evening, sixth graders. Welcome to another lesson in Chapter 3 of Natural Resources. This is Lesson 33, and we'll be covering pages 68 to 70. We're mainly going to talk about the water cycle and other parts of water, such as fresh water and salt water. And we need to know that water is our most valuable resource. Without water, all organisms would die. For instance, plants could not make photosynthesis or the sugar or glucose they need without water. If you went many days without drinking something, your body would die. It would not be able to make the energy it needs. 75% of the earth is covered with water. The earth is known as a hydrosphere, meaning hydro, we already learned, means water, and sphere means three-dimensional ball or a three-dimensional circle. So basically, the earth is a ball of water. And all that water in the earth is included in our lakes, oceans, streams, rivers, all the water that is in the ground, and all the water vapor that is in the air. Now, the water on earth is divided as such. You see, salt water is our most abundant water resource. It's over 97% of the earth's water. And just a small portion of that, about 3% of that, is fresh water. However, most of that fresh water is frozen. You can't drink it. Of that, about 21% of that is actually fresh water, but most of that is in the ground. What is liquid water, what is drinkable water, you'll find 52% of that is in our lakes and streams and rivers, but a good portion of that is the water that's in the soil. Then you have a small portion of that that is water vapor, which is considered fresh water. So the bottom circle is what and the quarter of the pie in the middle circle is what we consider fresh water, fresh drinkable water. This is a diagram of the water cycle. What happens is the sun warms the surface of the water, and that liquid changes from that water changes from a liquid to a gas. When it becomes a gas, it raises to the atmosphere. But not only from our oceans and our lakes does this evaporation happen, but we have from plants, when they finish photosynthesis, it releases water into the air called transpiration. So we have evaporation and transpiration, and this is water vapor going up into the atmosphere. When it goes up into the atmosphere, it cools because the atmosphere is much cooler. And when it cools, those particles come back together or condense, or we have condensation. And in this process, this is when clouds are made. Now, when those clouds get too heavy, we have what we call precipitation. And this is any water that falls to the surface. This can include snow, rain, sleet, hail, freezing rain. All of that is precipitation. It's water falling to the earth. When it comes back down to the earth, most of that soaks down into the ground, and this is what we call groundwater. We're going to cover a little bit of that later in this lesson. Eventually, all water runs back to the ocean, and when it's going across the ground, when it's going through our rivers and streams and headed back to the ocean, it picks up what we call a load. We learned that in Chapter 2. And you have dissolved load and suspended load. That dissolved load includes salt, and that is taken back to the ocean. This is why our oceans are so salty. Plus, in the evaporation process, when the vapor goes up into the atmosphere, that salt stays behind in the ocean. Our oceans are extremely important. Even though it's salty water, we can't drink it. That contains all this resources for us in the form of food. But a great resource in here is what we call phytoplankton. Now, phytoplankton, they're microscopic or very, very tiny plants and animals. And this is an example of a plant phytoplankton. They're the first in the food chain in the ocean. And they're so tiny that millions can fit into 1 teaspoon of ocean water. Now, this is extremely important, especially the phytoplankton that are plants, because they do photosynthesis just like a regular plant would, and it makes up about 50% of the Earth's oxygen. So this is a very, very important resource in our ocean. Now, we talked about our water supply, that most of it is salt water or ocean water, and about 3% of it is fresh water. But like I said, most of that fresh water is frozen in our ice caps and in our glaciers in the North and South Pole. Most of the liquid water that is drinkable is underground. And this is an example, this is a diagram of what these pockets of water might look like. Water gets stored in these underground cracks and pores. It will go into any place that there's a space. And in this top layer of soil, you'll see some water particles, but most of it is down in the lower levels in the subsoil in these large spaces called aquifers. They're just large pockets of space that water filters through. Okay, I'm sorry about that last clip in this video, but I will have you read pages 68 to 70, and I will see you tomorrow morning.